How do you keep that pure?
Cut it off, get alone with the Lord, ask God to revitalize your spirit.
This YouTube channel that you started that is getting great recognition, insanely beautiful.
These like stripped back just moments of being like, nothing's planned.
So when you even said last weekend that you just choose a song or a couple songs and go for it, I was like, wow, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, we pick a key,
we pick
one
a
song, and then we
like,
just go.
We didn't go out and be like, oh, I hope these people notice us when we do this. That's never been the heart. Like, oh, I hope I get someone's attention. Like, I think we just wanted to put like beautiful stuff together in its rawest form. Wow, God, what an honor that you would allow us to be the soundtrack for people.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. Hey, everybody, this is Rita Springer. Welcome to the Rita Springer podcast, and worship is my weapon. I love interviews like this, not just because I have history with the people that I interview, but because I love what they're doing. So today on the podcast, we have the Serbans. I'm saying that right, guys? Yep. What is that? Is that Russian?
It is Hungarian.
Oh, I knew it was got to be something over there.
Hungarian. I'm glad I know that.
Caitlin and Garett Serban are on the show today, and I just kind of randomly was with you guys about a week ago. I was like, why don't you guys come in and do a podcast with me? And I've known Caitlin for a while. We were on staff in the worship department at Gateway around the same time. Yeah. You stayed on for a while after I resigned.
I was more contractual work with worship development side of things, but I was full-time at their school.
Yeah.
In the accounts department. And did a lot of worship stuff. But
That's right.
Gateway was home for a really long time.
But you're originally from, I always want to say Port Arthur, but it's Beaumont.
Mm-hmm.
Beaumont, Texas, which is kind of out there.
Yeah, in the middle of nowhere.
In the middle of nowhere. But you guys love football.
We love
football.
Love.
15,000 people show up on Friday nights.
Yeah, it's
like insane.
A high school game.
It's insane.
Because they won state last year and it was bananas.
Yes.
Crazy.
Yeah, that was a shocker to me when I first was invited to come. Your parents have a beautiful church out there called Encounter. And I was invited, I think when you were on staff, and I was on staff, right?
Yes.
I think I was living in Dallas at the time.
Yes, we did an event down there together.
That was when I found out really about small town Texas football.
There's nothing like it.
Yeah, there was nothing like it. And Justice was young enough to where he wasn't in high school yet, wasn't playing, competitive football until we got to Tennessee, and I was like, oh yeah, I know all about this.
Yeah, you're talking like everybody rides their golf carts to the games on Friday night,
which is kind of fun.
All businesses shut down at like 3:30 or 4.
It's like that show,
That's
Friday
crazy.
Night Lights. It's literally Friday Night Lights.
It's amazing.
Show.
Yeah, people that don't live in that kind of understanding, they see those shows, but they don't understand that's really how it is.
So
it's
real.
It's real.
No, people shut down. They're like, football players eat free. Like the stuff you see is legit in our town.
That's crazy.
There's one street that's downtown, P&G, the whole deal. Like when they went to state, I'm pretty sure everyone went. Like the 20,000 people in our town all drove to Dallas, Texas to be at the game.
Now, is this little stadium that they play in, is it owned by the city to where the city's like actually it's money's coming into the city from these games?
I have absolutely no idea.
Well, you know me, I'm always going to look for the business.
Who's making money here?
Well, I met Caitlin again years ago, and I feel like sometimes I'm Anna in the temple. I think because I had this encounter with the Lord so early on in my like mid-20s, where the Lord really started telling me that I needed to be on the lookout for those that were coming after my generation that would be the sound of worship. And so I've just kind of like secretly been looking for the voices. And I felt like the Lord back then said, you'll know when you find them. And, I've met so many different worship leaders in my day, especially a lot of women worship leaders. I think I meet those more on the road than I do men, even though it really is a wide platform. Yeah. I think the notoriety platform is more of a male platform. But when I'm on the road, like in in the churches, in the trenches of the churches, in the local churches and cities, a lot of these worship leaders are women. And some of them just would have this thing on them. And I always was looking for that thing. And you always had that thing on you. You know, we kind of related you a bit to Carrie Joe because you had a Carrie Joe kind of sound. But it really, too, was Carrie's always carried this purity on her, and you've always had that. And then when I met your parents, I was like, a lot of times it comes from stock, and it comes from really good fathering and mothering and keeping kind of you held to standards and held to really what worship's all about. Your dad and mom pastors so well in that church, and you can just tell when you're in the atmosphere of even your church. But I've watched you throughout the years, and honestly, I was thinking about this morning, Caitlin. It's like whenever I meet a worship leader or a young worship leader or singer, and it happens really quick for them, where they're not on the scene long, and boom, they get a record deal, and they just go off the cuff. And the next 2 years, they're winning awards and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not saying this with everybody, but with most of my experience, there is always this kind of thing missing. But when there is someone that comes along where the Lord actually takes time with them and does it, they're not just thrust into the limelight really quick. I'm always like, there's something on that person. And I actually feel that about you, because all those years ago, I was like, man, this girl's like, when somebody finally notices her, she's just going to go lickety split and blah. But God's actually almost kept you in a place of marinating. Wow. And I think that's why I'm so fascinated with it, because, we had this conversation really quick in Texas last week, but like, there's no doubt that I think what God has on both of you, because, you've got a different story, Garett, but, and how even God, I want you kind of to tell a little bit about how God connected you guys together. You're married. And, but, sometimes when there's a legit thing on people that carry a legit thing, not just for the church, but for the heart of worship, especially in today's society and in the church today, of how we glamorize and create a celebrity culture among our worship. This is the culture your generation is actually most seeing. Yeah. Mine didn't. Like, we were raising the dead. That's how we came into worship. We were writing songs, and because we saw the dead raised last week with the songs we were writing. Crazy, yeah. So we were writing them again. And that's just a completely different culture than how your generation's walking it out, and the generation behind you is walking it out. Yeah. So I want you to tell your story a little bit about how you got to the place that you're at. You're still involved in the local church, but God's moving on your life and doing great things. And you can lead us into like this YouTube channel that you started that is getting great recognition, insanely beautiful. Actually makes me want to cry. There's not a lot of that on YouTube in the way that you guys are doing it so effortlessly. And that's the word that I'm always, whenever I see you guys pull up, I'm like, it's effortless. It's just absolutely effortless. Kind of reminds me a little bit too of the circuit riders. Some of their worship sets that are just like, they're just spontaneous, and they just go and they go someplace. So tell us kind of the story of how you guys met and what God's been doing with you in the local church, and then in what you feel like God's called you to do.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Start us out. Come on.
So we're both pastors' kids.
Through and
through. Our parents are pastors. Our grandparents are pastors. Yeah. It's super deep.
Crazy.
We got a crazy generation legacy of pastors. Yeah.
And from here, all from here, Tennessee.
Yep, Tennessee. We moved down here in 2001.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then my pops had a church in downtown Franklin. Handed it off to my dad when we moved down here, and he's been a pastor in this area since we moved here. And so it's been a legacy of pastors, and all my brothers are in ministry to some degree, and it's beautiful.
No sisters?
No sisters. 3 brothers, no sisters.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a party.
Yeah, it's a party. It's it's fun. So I mean, we're pastors' kids. I think it started in our homes. I think it was cultivated in our homes. Kind of what you said with our parents. I remember sitting at the piano with my dad when I was like 5 years old, and he would play over us, and we would write a song together. And there's one specifically about the spirit of fear that I sing over my 2-year-old now.
Wow.
It's never been
From when your
published.
dad sang it to you. Oh.
At 5 years old, I remember it like it was yesterday. Just sitting, we lived in Colorado, and so I think it was something that was, I think, like cultivated inside of us, and the soil was like really fertile.
Yeah.
And it was just seeds that were thrown and thrown and thrown. And I think then, I get into college, I go off to Dallas, I get really involved in our local church there. And the school that I attended the King's University, which was just an incredible, amazing place for me.
Did you study worship there? Is
I
that
did.
what you're okay?
I did. So it was kind of a newer program at the time.
Yeah.
So it was still only like a 2-year program. So I ended up going there and just was like, I'm going to study worship and get a degree in this, even though I don't think you really need a degree in worship necessarily. But my thought process is like the training side of it, getting out of like a small town. I'd only been in a small town. Wanting just more experience. I started taking voice lessons there. I started learning, as simple as like song maps and all these different things that were instilled in like this well-oiled machine, and it was just beautiful to learn. I such a heart for development was deposited in me there. And I just served. I served for a really long time. And I was really frustrated at times because I had never had to go in a season my whole life. I had never really had to go in a season where I felt hidden. And so my time at Gateway was incredible. And I loved everything that I was deposited in me, and I'm forever grateful. And I made my fair share of mistakes, in that kind of season of my life. But I think my heart posture was it wasn't ready. And I think the Lord knew
Well,
it.
you always had a place at your home church.
Always.
And then you go into this massive mega.
Yeah. And so I think that was a culture shock for me, where it was our audition nights for Encounter were 10 people. And then our audition nights for Gateway were like 700 people.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
crazy.
Oh my gosh, there's so many people here.
Yeah.
All wanting the same thing. And so it's just a whole thing. So I just got really connected at a local campus in North Richland Hills, and started serving.
Which is the way to go in a mega church, I think, is getting a local.
I started serving there and would do youth and started to be able to do that. And then it took me a little bit of time to get on weekends, and then I started teaching voice for their worship development. So it was kind of just like building blocks, but it was not instantaneous. Like it's kind of what you said earlier. Like nothing I've done has been instantaneous. And now, 30, a wife, a mom, like loving this season of our life. I'm so grateful. Cool. I'm so thankful for just the pruning and like marinating season. But I basically got offered a position. One of my campus pastors at North Richland Hill was going to be another pastor in Florida. The Hall family, they're incredible.
Shout out. Incredible.
But they invited me to go and be their worship pastor for a campus in Florida. And I was like, okay, Lord, like, is this it? I had a couple other opportunities to maybe stay in Dallas. And I just felt like God was like, you need to go. I knew nobody. I packed my stuff. I think I was 25 years old.
I remember talking to you when you had made the decision to go down there.
Yeah. And I just got up, I left, I moved, not knowing anyone, went and gotten plugged in again to a local church. It was my first, I guess you could say, like pastoral, kind of in the local church, building a team. Like we were starting a campus from zero. And
that's where you met your hubs.
I met Garett. Garett was the lead. The lead worship pastor there.
But you didn't know her at all.
Oh, no.
Because you'd never been in Dallas.
No. So my little brother lives in Dallas.
Yes, I knew his little brother before I knew.
Yeah, she knew them. But no, I moved to Florida to go to Bible college, and then out of that, took a job down in Fort Myers. And kind of the rest of it. But I was thinking about it too, even back to Legacy. Like, my parents met singing as well. So, like, we've got this
and so did mine.
Wow.
Like, it's kind of crazy.
Both in a singing group in college.
Yep. And then it kind of just flipped. My dad led worship when we first moved down here, and I would play drums. He had a little hand sign for the chimes. I don't know if that's still a thing.
For the love.
Shout out. If he watches this, he's going to laugh. I remember he had a hand sign for chimes, but I was just thinking about it. I was like, yeah, like worship, ministry through and through. So went to college. The Lord just opened a door for me to move to Florida. And Bible college was incredible. And then
what Bible college did you go to?
Southeastern.
Okay, you were at Southeastern.
Yeah.
All right.
So just an amazing experience. Got incredible experience. Got a full ride tuition to go there. That was the only reason I was going.
And did you do their worship program too?
Yeah, I did it all.
Now, were you like a leader there in there? Okay.
Oh, yeah. Leader. So I learned a ton in that time, and I was the first brother to go to college. Like my two older brothers came out with full-time jobs, super successful in their sphere, what they do, and I was like, well, I guess I got to go somewhere. My first job was the janitor at my dad's church. Like that was just that's all I was doing. And my dad's like, hey, maybe you should check out college. And I was like, never really thought about it. And the Lord just opened wide a door and took a leap of faith. I did not want to move to Florida because I knew no one. And but the Lord was so kind and all the things. So I did 4 years of college, did all the things, SU worship, incredible experience, and got to learn how to write songs.
Yeah, you must have been writing with them.
Yeah, it was amazing. All the incredible people, still connected to a lot of people.
Yeah.
There. And then found a job in my 4 years there, moved to Fort Myers to the church and took a job down there. And then that's where we hired Josh because we were looking at a third campus. And then he brought up Caitlin and Caitlin, I don't call you that. That's hilarious. Looked at Kate and brought her down there, and we just hit it off. Yeah. I mean, but what's funny though is like we were the two single worship leaders. So everyone's like, "Oh, your wife's coming," and I didn't even know her.
Oh, how
all
funny!
These people were like so much pressure, and so we were like instant like,
no,
this is not happening.
This is not going to be.
I literally remember telling Josh in the car. She was down to interview or something. Maybe you'd taken the job already, and we were going to check out the campus.
Yeah, something like that.
And I said, "Hey, man, I just want to let you know, this is never going to happen."
Yeah, and I think I told him the same thing. I was like, hey, this is not a thing.
And if you know Josh...
He'll be a great friend.
If you know Josh Hawley, just sit there and smile.
He goes, yeah, okay.
He'd be like, yeah, sure. Like, I love him for it. He'll laugh at me about it.
So you guys weren't attracted to each other at all?
I don't know if it was as attraction as much as it was just like... We didn't want to do what everyone was saying
right,
to do.
Right,
like,
right. That's kind of awkward. That's kind of awkward.
It was more like, you're putting me together. I don't even know this guy. Like
all this stuff. We're just like...
That's a hard no for me.
Yeah. But, I mean, we hit it off. Our sweetest friends, Stu and Carly, were my best friends, and then became her best friends, and we hung out every day.
Oh.
And what was cool is when she moved there, the campus wasn't going to open until January. So you moved there in March? Before
like
Easter.
April or something. February, March.
Yeah.
April, something like that.
And so we led worship together for 8 months before she was off to her campus. And we were engaged before
the campus
before the campus started.
So I moved there in like February. We were hard no on like ever being a thing. And then that lasted for about 4 months. And then we just, we got to know each other, started hanging out as friends, and then ended up dating in June. Yeah. Got engaged in October.
Yeah, it was
2019, and then we got married
a week before
COVID in 2020.
Wow.
So we were just, it was funny because,
Did you have your honeymoon in COVID or out of COVID?
Right before.
So we actually honeymooned in Seattle the first week of March, 2020.
It was crazy.
And I think like, we were in a coffee shop and we overheard somebody say, oh my gosh, it was the first COVID case like right up the road. Well, at that time we live in Florida
we don't know
and
nothing.
It took Florida a little bit to understand what COVID was anyway. And we were just like, we had no idea what COVID was. And then we like flew home and total opposite side of the States. And it was a ghost town. And we were like, what just happened?
Yeah, we got home and
so
the church shut down.
we instantaneously went into quarantine the first week of our marriage. And so we were quarantined and my campus ended up really not launching. Yeah. So we launched in January of 2020. We had I think we had 8 services in person. And then everything shut down and we brought everything central. We started doing the online experiences, kind of just navigating what everybody in the local church, felt in those years. But we did that in 2020 and
I don't think we opened up till like July. was
Did
the first
did
thing.
the campus ever open up, the second campus?
Right.
Okay, it did.
Yeah.
It did. So we launched with, I think, like, there was a little over 400 people there at launch Sunday. A lot of people came just for, like, hey, we're so excited and proud of you guys. We're going to come support you, you know. And then, like any campus does, you know, we're running
Kinda leveled
200,
out.
250. It levels out to
Yeah.
who's going to call that place home.
Right.
And then, unfortunately, COVID did strike it a little bit. But I feel like every church experience
Yeah.
just kind of like, oh my gosh, what do we do? And then when you start having in person, like, how does it work? And, you know, all the different things.
Did you guys though before like what are your dreams while you're in there? Are you thinking in your heads, we're going to be worship pastors in a church and we're going to lead people in worship and write songs? Or is there, because I always want to kind of find the lines of definition when you carry a dream or you carry a calling, not just to identify as a worship leader or worship pastor. Some people do, but were there more dreams inside of both of you where when you met, you started having conversations of, well, I desire for maybe it to look like this one day, or maybe it to look like this. Were you always just thinking we'll be worship leaders and pastors of a church? Or did you ever think artistry,
Right.
Songwriting? What were some of your dreams in that?
I feel like I'm a big into the prophetic words and grateful grew up with some incredible people in my life who spoke over me. And so I always just had this like maybe there's more.
Yeah.
But all we've ever known is the local church, and that was a priority for us. And so, that was when we were down there. It's funny because, the sessions, and I know we'll talk about that in a little bit with the YouTube stuff, we actually, started that during COVID. And I don't know what the conversation was between us.
I think
we were
was,
like, oh, well, let's.
I think it was more exciting that we married. Like, our dream was always to marry someone who did worship with each other.
Right.
Like, I think that was a
course.
dream of both of ours individually, and then the Lord answered it by bringing us together.
Yeah.
So I think when we got married and then we're quarantined, we're like, let's do these videos.
Yeah, let's
just
get in a
put
room
out
and
some
sing.
worship videos, and they were as dry as.
Oh gosh,
dry could possibly be.
We
I
just
mean, they
plugged
were
up,
we put our iPhone on a stand, had an acoustic guitar, and just were like, let's do this.
Yeah.
And it was great, but it wasn't I don't know that we had any vision or we hadn't prayed into it really.
Yeah.
We kind of were just really excited to
Yeah.
be married and have a spouse that does worship, and we love spontaneous worship, and we love hearing and discerning the Holy Spirit and what is he saying and what is he saying to the church and to us and all these different things. And so honestly, now that I think about it, we never really sat here and said we want to be artists one day.
Yeah.
It's never been a
What about
thing for us.
prophecies? Do you remember prophecies
There-
when you were little about people calling, speaking things out over you guys?
Oh yeah. And it all pointed to
Yeah.
you literally
Yeah.
you have the sound of the generation inside of you.
Yeah.
And what does that mean?
Yeah,
you
massive
you're
words.
okay.
Those, I'm
yeah.
okay, but
it's you're the Joshua generation. Yeah. And so is everybody else that you spoke
Yeah.
to.
Great.
They'll be in
so
the
we hear all
Joshua
these words and
generation.
we're you're gonna write songs for the nations are gonna hear the songs you write and stuff like that. And so those are things that I would definitely pray into.
Yeah, we have a lot of prophetic words.
Yeah.
We grew up pretty charismatic in just how we grew up with our families. So the prophetic was something we have been really just prone to knowing and understanding and believing and all these different things. And so it's funny because Garett pretty much can tell you every single prophetic word he's ever gotten since he was 12.
Wow.
It is something that I think is so incredible.
Just because you remember it?
Remember, and I write them down.
Yeah,
I pray into them.
yeah.
Those are things that still resonate in my heart
Yeah.
when I was a 15-year-old and getting prophesied over.
Which is kind of what you're supposed to do.
Yeah,
when you
I
get upset.
prayed into it.
And we honestly, in the last probably 4 or 5 years since we'll get to it, but we ended up moving back to Texas or local worship pastors, whatever. Garett writes out all of our prophetic words and we pray over them every single day.
Wow.
We have a vision board in our room that
that's
has
so
some
great.
that's on them. And so there are things on there that are so big that I can't even comprehend. And we just pray, God, we're calling these things into, fruition.
Yeah.
would we just sow these seeds and would you water them and let's see what fruit comes from them. And so there are things that we've seen come to pass. There are things we're believing for, and there are other things that we're just praying over because I don't know what else to do but to pray over them, you know. But yeah, I think to answer your question on the local church, like it's just been who we are. And I don't know that the local church will ever not be a
priority for us.
Passion for us.
Right.
Like we love development. We love like going into a church and seeing people find their giftings and anointings and
step into it
and watching.
So
like we do these things called develop nights, and we've literally watched people at all the church. Like I've only been on staff really at 2 churches, one in Florida and one in Texas, where we were like the main people.
Right.
And we do these develop nights, and to watch somebody walk in and like not really know how to do in-ears or all these different things, but have incredible vocal ability, but are terrified of a platform, to watch them go from like a develop night to 3 years down the road where we've sat with them, we've prayed with them, we've poured into them on the practical side, the spiritual side, these developments, to now see them like leading our weekend services. I'm like, it's
everything.
That is the work of the Spirit in our church and in our people.
Yeah.
And I think development is just something that we're super passionate about with people. And I don't know, I think I'm reminded to the scripture where it's like, when you are planted in the house of God, like you will flourish.
Yeah.
And so it is like, I think that is something that regardless of, you know, if we're local church worship pastors for the rest of our life, or if we choose to step away at some point and do more traveling type deals, I will always be planted and rooted to a local church, because it's those people that flourish and they bear fruit. And then later in that scripture, in like the Amplified version, it says like, we will tell of his faithfulness and his promises. And I'm like, that's the life that I want to live. A rooted, planted,
whatever it looks like.
Whatever it looks like. If something that can be rooted and planted and flourishing and fruitful. And then my life tells of his faithfulness. My life tells of his promises. So I think, like, I don't know if that answers the local church side of things.
Absolutely does. I think too, like, even back to when we even started just the little stuff, like, we didn't think anything, but like our heart was, what's going to benefit the church? Like, what's going to benefit the kingdom at the end of the day? And when we started it, I think it lasted 3 weeks,
I don't even think it lasted 3
but
weeks.
because then we
In
felt
2020.
the shift in our heart, like, oh, I think there's some transition coming for us, and that's when we began to talk with her dad about potentially coming to Texas.
Back.
And so it kind of put on pause, but we're like, there wasn't really anything on pause, because we were just like, this is all pointing back to just local church. Like, we just wanted to, whatever, like, have people an opportunity, because people were worshiping at home. So maybe that was I wish I remember what we had talked about, but maybe we're like, oh, people are at home. Like, this could just be something people can listen to, because we're always turning on some worship set and letting it just play in the house, because that's just,
I think a lot of online expressions started in 2020.
Oh, totally.
Gosh,
Absolutely.
So it's like you're watching around and you're like, oh my gosh, like people are really just sitting at home. Like, let's do this, or let's do that. Like, you know, so I think a lot of people maybe felt that, especially maybe some creatives, like, okay, what are we going to do? Like, how can we do this? Like, you know, we can do it on YouTube or whatever, just because people.
I mean,
are
I
home.
survived like that because there are churches that couldn't meet. So I would film the worship for them and then send their worship sets to them, because that's how they did it there. Which we'll remember that in 30 years, if I'm still alive. In 30 years, like, I remember in 2020. But yeah, I mean, it's just, it almost like it started a different culture. You know, to be common that you just turn it on and let it go, you know. And so you started it then, but then when you went back to Texas,
we just, our whole focus was just on the church. Like, we get into it, we want to build, we want to rebuild, we want to do all the things, develop what we've been called to do. And so that's what we did. And
the heart of our pastor was to write songs for the church. And so we threw ourselves in our church, and we threw ourselves in building our teams.
And even before Kate even showed up to the church in Florida, I did a project with the church, because that was the same heart of the pastor there. And so, like, and then obviously we're learning from school as well. And so we kind of jumped right into the season, and kind of the tagline, he's like, man, I love the movements and love the different sounds all over the world. He's like, but I think we need to create our own voice. And I was like, let's do it. I think it's so beautiful to write songs for your own church.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you're capturing the heartbeat of your church.
Yeah.
And then for them to grab a hold of it, and then that becomes like, you flow into that song and everyone's like, this is our song. This is our cry. Like, I love that. I think that's amazing.
Hey, everybody, I want to take a minute to talk to those of you and encourage those of you who maybe you're planting a church, you're on staff at a church, you're in the children's department of a church, and you run and oversee the curriculum at your kids' division of church. There is some friends of mine that have developed this curriculum that I just think it's the best curriculum for kids' church out there. It's called Amazing Kids. It is a Bible-based, spirit-filled curriculum. I know these guys. They are incredible creatives. Connie and Tyler Bates are the genius behind this, and they just love serving kids and serving God in serving our kids. If this is something that your church is looking for, if it's something that you as a pastor of your children's department is looking for, an enriched Bible-based curriculum to bring to your children's department of your church or your church plant, this is something that I would highly recommend that you do. I fully believe and back what these guys do. My own kid was under it for years, and it's just the way that they're doing it right now is just beautiful. So you can find all that information if you go to amazing.kids, and there's a kind of a special discount code that you can get, or a promotional code that you can get if you type in Rita in the promotional area of that, and they'll give you special pricing on that. But it's something that I just highly recommend. And kids are so important. They're so important in our churches. What we do when we drop our kids off in church and what's happening in the Sunday school area is so important for your children. And this curriculum is one of the best, and you will love it for your church. So check that out. It's incredible, and I back it 100%. What I find fascinating about you guys and people like you, which is why I think I am such a fan of it, is that the way you're articulating this is different than some of the conversations I have where there's a model for it, that it starts here and then it goes here and then it goes here. Much like if you're cultivating in a local church a worship team and then you decide you want to do a record, well, then the next step is this and the next step looks like this. And the way you guys have always kind of come off, you knowing you and then meeting you, it's like, it wasn't as if even in Florida, you guys were trying to be the next elevation. You were just really trying to do what your community and your church culture was for your church community and your church culture. And I think that that's the thing that gets a little bit confusing if the model or the manuscript says, oh, we're trying to look like this and we'll be the next blah, blah, blah. And everybody's kind of fights for that model, but then they forget the model of just the local church of, no, we're not writing songs just so that we could break out and the world could hear it. And then we go on tour and we're writing songs for our local. How do you keep that pure?
I don't know. I always thought to myself, I'm like, if other churches sing our songs, that's the cherry on top.
Yeah.
Cool. Like, wow, what an honor that. I remember the first time someone, sang a song from our church. It was like San Antonio. I was like, oh man, that's so cool. Whatever.
Like he asked for the tracks or the
I was like, oh, awesome. But like, I just never, my heart was never, and our heart was never to be like, oh, we want these songs to do whatever. Like, I think we just saw the benefit, the benefit of seeing our church sing it, and then even the benefit of seeing our team learning how to write, because the church we showed up to didn't have a writing culture. And so we had to teach that. And what we did was we just created the space for it. So we're like, hey, if you want to write a song or learn how to flex that muscle, let's show up on Friday night and we're going to go from 6 to 10 and we're going to write songs and we're just going to see what happens. And then it was just the reward of seeing the church catch on to it was the biggest reward. And then to hear people like, man, this song has changed my life. man, what an honor. And I know this person personally, versus, oh, it's really hard to get in a room and be like, all right, I'm writing a song for the Big C church.
Right.
Versus, because we always start out our night to writes is what we call them, is like, what's God speaking to our house?
Right.
That we can write for and articulate for. And so I don't know. I think there just never was a.
Yeah, I don't think the heart posture was ever like we're writing so anybody else can hear it.
Yeah.
The heart posture was and still is we're writing and doing whatever we're doing for our people that God has put us in front of now.
Yeah.
Like that's just always been.
Which I think is what's so needed to see that I love about you guys is that you've seemed to be content in the season that God has you in. Even though you know and you live with the expectation that there's more to come.
Yeah.
Sure.
But finding that contentness, is that easy or is it hard for you guys at times? Because if you're anticipating that there's more, how do you then stay fully blessed in the contentment of what God has you in the moment? Like how have you done that?
It's been
Jesus.
really, really hard.
We can't lie. There's been absolutely tough seasons. There's been moments where we've had to turn off social media because in the world we live in today, it's all about the highlight reel.
Yeah.
And so you're sitting there like, I'm doing nothing in Groves, Texas, which I've never heard of until I moved here.
That's an actual town.
Yeah, that's a town. Groves, Texas. Look it up.
Groves, Texas. That is where
Groves,
we live.
Texas.
Yeah.
It's
It's out there.
And it's so easy to fall into that trap of
Yeah.
like, I'm not doing what they're doing. I'm not doing what but
Yeah, I
God's
think
called me here.
But you did it. Like you moved to Groves.
We
did.
We
moved,
did.
yeah.
But even moving to Groves, which is like isolated, away from everything, like it's not like a Franklin or a Nashville where you can call somebody and go and write in a minute.
Right.
Groves is
5-hour
very.
drive
It
to
feels
Dallas.
very like isolated and hidden.
Yes, it
almost.
does.
Like even in that, it was like. There was a year in 2023, there was probably about an 8-month stint that I would look at Garett and I'm like, I have to delete everything. Oof. Because every time I get on, I'm really excited and proud of everybody I'm watching. And I love it and I'm encouraged and I'm inspired. But there's something in me that is like, it was almost like a lie of the enemy saying like, you'll never experience that. Or like envy would creep in, or jealousy, or comparison. Add whatever you might think. And I told Garett, I said, I'm going on a total social media hiatus. Like, don't tag me in anything. If you need to post something, like, feel free to grab my account. Like, but I will do nothing. And it was the best thing I'd ever done.
Wow.
I really feel like God healed my mind. Like I really, really, really feel like the healing power of Jesus was so evident in my life because I got to be like, God, I do this for you.
Yeah.
I don't do it for anything else.
Right.
I don't do it for, and I'm learning and learned in that season and I'm still learning this like fear of man versus this fear of God.
Yeah.
And like my fear of man was so heightened of just like, if I don't do this or I don't do that, then they're not going to like us or they're not going to want us or like these things aren't going to happen or I'm never going to, whatever the case may be, when God's like, hey, I just asked you to fear me. And I asked you to come into a hidden place with me. So do that, and I'll meet you there. And I feel like in the last probably 4 years, like we're right at 4 years of being in Groves, probably in the last 2 years, I feel like God gave us this scripture, and it's in Psalms, but it says befriend faithfulness. And I put it in all capital letters. Befriend faithfulness.
Yeah.
And that's really what
So
we did.
good.
We plowed the ground and we would look at each other. We live on we have this we bought this tiny little first home and we live on about 1/2 acre and like our whole backyard is just like grass. And so I would look out like our kitchen, Garett knows. Garett always tells me, he's like, you're a loud prayer. I'm like, well, leave the house if you don't want me to. Whatever. But we're looking out and I would turn around and I would look at Garett and I'm like, I just feel so hidden. I feel so hidden. I feel so like, and it was really crappy at first. Yeah. And then it became so amazing where I would then look around and I'm like, this season, like we got to have our first baby there. Like we have a 2-year-old daughter, and we got to have our first child there with our families, and like we got to be parents and experience the presence of God and like just all these things. But it just kept coming back to befriend faithfulness, befriend faithfulness. When I didn't want to go to Sunday church, befriend faithfulness because God's called you here. When I didn't want to have the hard meetings with staff members or volunteers or whatever, befriend faithfulness.
Hey, everybody. I want to tell those of you that are musicians and specifically piano players about something that I've been using that really has transformed and changed a recording process for me. There is a company that I found that I've partnered with that has been lending me this incredible piano bar, is what they call it. It's from Earthworks Audio. You can find them online, earthworksaudio.com. And this is how this piano bar works. As you can see, this piano bar fits inside of a piano like so. I think it would work for an upright as well. I have a baby grand. This bar just sits right in between the piano edges, and it has these 2 mics. It's a very, very sensitive piano bar. It just sits right in this piano bar, and then it just has this connecting wire that comes out for all the plugins that you would need to plug into your interface. It's super easy. It's incredibly convenient. If you are an acoustic piano player, if you have a home studio and you're looking to mic an acoustic piano, Earthworks Audio is one of your best bets. Check them out online.
And I think that is, I think it's a word for a lot of people who find themselves in the local church.
Oh, that's so
desiring
good.
to be out,
Right.
Desiring for the next, because we're saying befriend faithfulness, but we're praying over these prophetic words that it's hard to be like, how is this going to happen where we're at? You know?
Yeah.
And so it's like, but there's just this constant reminder of you befriend faithfulness because God's going to meet you there. And if, the comparison thing or whatever these traps are that we now find ourselves in as creatives, as worship pastors, as worship leaders, it's like, cut it off. Cut it off. Get alone with the Lord. Ask God to revitalize your spirit and revitalize your calling, what he's told you, because he'll tell you, you're here. He'll tell you, go ahead and just plant your feet because you're going to befriend faithfulness, And so I think that's something we really held on to. It has not been easy.
No.
I think, though, that what I hear you saying, too, I mean, just even in my own experience, is that it's so good to know that it's kind of normal to be called to something and then feel the struggle in even the timing of what you feel called to, even though you can't really articulate what it is it's supposed to look like. But where God has you sometimes in the meantime, it's that now and the not yet, between the now and the not yet, there has to be a place of resolve and a place of, okay, God, I'm willing to be where I don't want to be, doing what I don't necessarily feel like I'm super called to do all the time. But if this is where you want me to get me to the next thing. And I think it makes people feel less crazy, especially those serving in the local church that feel like they're called to a little bit more than where they are in that particular city, or what they feel like they're called to within that job, or whatever it is in ministry. And I love the honesty that you're saying it, because I don't think people talk about that much. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's almost like you either can't dream out loud and be honest about what you want as a dreamer, and then you feel like you're gonna upset God if you tell him that it's been rough. You know what I'm saying? So, and I think it's so good for even young people to feel like, hey, I'm called to more than this. But I mean, even last week, the Lord was talking to me about disappointment. And he said, you need to be really careful with disappointment, because disappointment undealt with leads to disobedience. And I just was like, oof.
So good.
And sometimes it's not big disobedience. It's small disobedience, but it comes out of like, why am I still here? Why am I still here? Why am I moving on?
Right.
And then what's wrong with me? Why haven't I gotten this yet? And I think it's so good when you talked about just taking away what's the distraction.
Yeah.
That makes you feel the longing all the time. That makes the cut feel deeper or whatever. And I just think you need to talk about that stuff more because there are probably so many other people where you guys are at that feel called to more in the creative, feel called to more in ministry, but don't know why they're in they're in a holding pattern, you know, or haven't been seen by whoever needs to see them yet and call them into the next thing. How did you guys then, because you're still in Texas, but it hasn't been that long that you launched this YouTube thing again and then kind of watched it take off.
Yeah.
It's honestly been crazy. I mean, but I just so we did a church record for Encounter, and it was beautiful. I was so proud of it. I remember we released it. I'm like, man, I'm just proud of these songs. Like our church loves it, whatever. And I felt the word release, and that was it. I was like, okay, all right, let's do a church. Like that makes sense. Like we're local church worship pastors. We're gonna release a church record.
And it was so life-giving for our
Oh my
church.
gosh, it was awesome.
It was amazing.
We still sing the songs like
it was
God
incredible.
moves, and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And then we released that in 2023 September. And then I still kept hearing that word release.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, like, well, all right, babe, we need to release. What does that look like? And so we just literally in March of this year, 2024, we're like, all right, we're just going to find the most low budget way to release. And we're going to get in a room together with one of our favorite keys players, Caleb, and we're just going to,
he's great.
We're just going to go for it. We're just going to hit record and we're just going to go for it. We're going to pick a song. And then we're just going to flow spontaneously. We're just going to, ask God to highlight songs or whatever, whether we're going to sing a new song in the moment or we're going to sing a song that people have heard before. We're just going to go for it. And that really was it. Like we just, we met with a guy who was going to help us record it and capture it. And he's like, yeah, guys, this sounds great. Let's do it. And so literally the next week we set up in our office. We cleared out our office at the church.
And moved all of our furniture.
We made a little makeshift studio, and because we were working on a home studio to do it at home, and now we're doing it there. So there was black for a little bit, and now it's all white. And so,
because you're at the church now when you do it.
We were at church.
Oh, now you're at your home.
So,
okay.
We built out our garage, and so big old white room. And more aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah, because it looks great. It looks great. But it's always looked great to me.
Yeah.
From the beginning of what you guys were doing, it was like, oh, they're really doing this great.
We've got some incredible. Garrison and Ryan and Caleb have been God sent for us just to help us out. But we just felt the word release. And we're like, okay, we love worship. We love flowing. We do these things at our church called 20 Days of Prayer and Fasting, which I'm sure most do. But we do 21 days of nights of worship, basically, twice a year. And so it's basically the same thing. We're like, we're going to pick one or two songs. And we're just going to go for it. So we're used to it the last 4 years. In a sense, God kind of has conditioned us in that way.
Yeah, it doesn't feel rehearsed, but it feels very natural when you guys do it. So when you even said last weekend that you just choose a song or a couple songs and then go for it, I was like, wow, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, we pick a key.
We pick one key.
Song. And then we just...
If it's too high for her, I sing it. If it's too high for me, she sings it.
We just go.
We just go off.
And it helps to have a guy like Caleb that just will fly with you anywhere you go.
We've thrown him for
We've
some
never
loops,
stumped
and
him.
We have never stumped him.
He's on it. So yeah, we've just started and I post obnoxiously just because I don't know. I just thought that was the right way to do it. And, it wasn't like it was 3 days in and we just saw this crazy traction pickup and people and all over, and I can't tell you the amount of emails and messages and people that are like even overseas, people are like, this has helped me get back to my first love with Jesus. And I'm like, that's worth all the time. Like that's worth everything to us. And I don't know if we necessarily had like a goal of what it could look like, our artistry or anything like that. We're just like, we want to get in a room, we want to hit record, and then let the Lord just move with us. There's no audience in the room. Like,
Yeah.
it's funny because like when we hit record, Garrison, who's running camera, can't hear anything. So if Caleb's playing over us and Kate and I are just like, this is great, let Caleb play. It's dead quiet in the room for him. And so he just stands
wow.
there. But the Lord's just been so kind with it, and we've done it every 6 weeks. We release something on Friday, and we take the 7th week off just to breathe a little bit.
Like one a week for 6 weeks.
Now,
but yeah.
what's the importance, do you think? Because I really want to like find out, especially because you guys are so young, like what your thoughts are in what the thing that's on that. The thing that's on that is why is it working? Why do you think it's working?
You know, I think.
What do you think, babe?
I think the Lord spoke to Garett and I, and we have this thing a saying for our family, but I think it really kind of bubbles over into our ministry too, is to protect purity.
Yeah.
It's the mandate of, I feel like, who we are
Yeah.
as worship pastors, as worship leaders, as parents, as husband and wife, all the things. And honestly, like, I don't know that there was an ulterior motive to be like, we like never in a million years have we felt like we're going to do this and we're going to restore purity, X, Y, and Z. Like, that's never been our heart, or a mindset to be like malicious or anything like that. But we just felt like God was like, hey, get in a room, turn your ears on, and let's go. Yeah. People just need for us, like our heart behind it, we were telling you before we got started, is like for people just to turn it on and it to fill their homes and it to fill their cars and it to fill their workplaces and not necessarily to watch it or like engage with it in a sense of like
just
watching
have it
what
become
we're doing,
the thing that's just there.
but just be the thing that's feeding your spirit and feeding your home, because I think the presence of God changes everything. And I think I mean, we're local worship pastors. We do all the things. We do all the mainstream worship. We do all the, we write our own stuff. We do all these things. We do radio stuff, like all this stuff that we see. But it was like, what are we missing? These like stripped back just moments of being like, nothing's planned. Nothing is, I don't know, like there's not an agenda. We're just going to go after the presence of God and see what he does and says. And it has just been, I don't even know, like.
Yeah, because we didn't go out and be like, oh, I hope these people notice us when we do this. That's never been the heart. Like, oh, I hope I get someone's attention. Like, I think we just wanted to put like beautiful stuff together in its rawest form. Yeah. And stuff that we're proud of. Obviously, we have someone who edits it for us because voices crack and all the different things. But like, our heart was just like, Lord, would you use the gifts that you've given us? And we feel like you said the word release. You didn't really put a specific on it. And so this is just what we thought was the best and the easiest for us and the most natural for us. We love getting in a room and singing together. We love when Caleb plays over us, whether it's in a room of 500 people or it's the three of us and Garrison. Like, it's just been beautiful for us. And I think it's even restored just our hearts of worship as well, to be like, man, I could just sit in this. I'm not in a rush. I'm not in a time constraint that we got to flip over the service after a 30-minute set.
Right.
Like, there's just, it's open.
But you're also on those things. It's not like you're trying to put out a perfect record. No. To get the perfect radio spot or the perfect, and I think it's why there's nothing. I want to keep repeating this because I don't want to be taken out of context in the fact that I'm anti those things.
No.
I'm not anti those things. I think there's a beautiful place for those things, and I think God uses those things, especially with certain people and certain artists that sing those things. But there's something that creates that the purity of what you guys are doing. I mean, I do the same thing, but so I get it. I guess I get it. There's a purity in it that's like, this is just like living room. You sit down and you just go after it. It's a natural thing that we should always be doing. Sure. And how do we preserve that? You guys are so young. I'm kind of in a different bracket of the understanding of that. How then do you keep that pure?
I think I'm reminded, I think Garett and I are in a unique position because we're considered, millennials. So we're not really this younger Gen Z, Gen X. I don't really know all the things. We're not really the younger. We're not really the older. We're kind of stuck somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
So I think our generation, I don't know that growing up in worship, it was ever thought that things weren't pure. Versus now, I think we're so oversaturated with so many different expressions of worship, and some people feel like some are better than the other. And, from somebody, again, it goes down to, I'm not against social media.
Right.
It has been everything that has helped Garett and I.
Yeah.
There's been so much fruit from it. But I think as even local pastors and local people who have desires to just go after the presence of God, I think we're looking at things that we're not experiencing or not having. Yeah. But I think one thing that the Lord talked to me about was, and I think I was guilty of this at one point, it's we're trying to sustain off of borrowed oil. When I think God's it's the parable of the 10 virgins.
Yes.
It's the 5 that brought enough oil to wait for the bridegroom. And it's the 5 that brought just enough and they ran out. And then they're asking the ones that brought enough to say, can I have your oil? And they're like, no.
Yeah.
I have to see him for myself.
Yeah.
I have to be ready.
Yeah.
And I think that right now we're in a situation in our worship culture is living off of borrowed oil from what we're seeing.
Wow. Yeah.
And
that's actually so great.
I think as, and I can speak to it in the local church of, people who are sitting in the local church and they're watching other churches that are doing the same thing that they're doing, but they might be having success and this church isn't.
Yeah.
I can watch that, and I'm watching, all these young adults who are doing the same thing, but I'm you have to bring your own oil.
Yeah.
You have to say, God, I'm going to go lock myself in the secret place. I'm going to get to know you. I'm going to ask for clean hands and a pure heart because that's what you say you're going to bless.
Yeah.
And I'm going to worship you without the lights, without the smoke, without the tuning, without the platform, without whatever. And I think I'm so convicted by that parable to be God, would I always be bringing enough oil?
Yeah. You know, Jenny Riddle, who's a great writer, she was talking to me. We had a conversation a couple months ago, and she brought up that portion of scripture. And she had done this kind of in-depth study about it. And we were talking about those that have kind of grown up in an entitled development within the church. And you and I have both seen, churches, kind of not do its service and stalling entitlement, and especially young people. But she was talking about how in scripture, the 10 that had their oil, the lamp was enough to light the way for another. And so when there's a cry of those that didn't know they needed to, or those that didn't prepare what they needed to, there is this sense of, can I walk alongside you and borrow your light?
Yeah.
And there's this beautiful thing where there is that, when it's that spirit that's I didn't realize
Right.
Yes.
I was supposed to have this on reserve and have enough. Can I borrow your light till I get to a place where I can purchase the oil? And there is that beautiful thing in scripture where that lantern was enough to light the path, but entitlement will say, give me your oil.
Yes.
I deserve what you have. Give me what you have. And I think that's something that there's so much of that like it's not that it's wrong. All of those things are wrong, but there is this place of, there has to be a residency of understanding the value of the oil.
Yeah.
and that you go into it with an understanding of the value of the oil. And my generation's actually done such a terrible job in handing the baton to you guys and saying, if you don't walk like this, talk like this, do it like this, you're not it, instead of just handing you the baton and being like, hey, I'm here for you. Whenever you need me, I'll be interceding for you and I'll be cheering you on in the process. Yeah. I wish my generation would have done that better, because I think it would have set another generation up to be like, oh, if we make mistakes, we're not going to be held, accountable in these areas, and then not thought well of. Right. Because I think that's what happened in the gap between, my generation and the next generation after that. And so that's why I think I'm looking at how is purity bottled? How is it contained in a social media run generation where there's, it's not like it's wrong. It's not like it's bad. You can't really do a lot because everybody's doing that. Right. And so to get anything out there, you have to use YouTube. Right. Sure. You have to use TikTok. Sure. You have to use those things. But there's a balance in it, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a mentality of purity that you have to, I think, come to the table with, that has to be in what you're doing from the start, or it will be oil that runs out. Yeah.
I think when we're talking about this, I just feel like our prayer is that when people, and like we said it, when you turn on these worship sessions, it just helps you learn more about Jesus.
Presence of God.
Not that, we're not like, oh, watch us and see how we lead
worship.
My prayer for people that watch this stuff is like, hey, turn it on to set the environment for you so that you can run after Jesus and you can learn about him and you can experience him and you can fill yourself up with his presence and go about your day and be marked by it, and there'll be a radiating over your life because you've experienced the glory, not because of what we're doing, but because you are making the space for God to come and move and speak to you. And so that's like, I think when we talk about like all these things, like, hey, like we just want to help turn it on and like, man, start loving on Jesus, because that's our goal at the end of the day. That's what we're doing. And we want to invite people into that, but we also want them to experience it for themselves and not just rely on a session, or it's even like relying just on the Sunday morning church experience to, sustain your life of following Jesus. No, like it needs to be a daily thing. That's how you're going to, find Jesus for yourself and who he is. And so I think that's really our prayer at the end of the day is like, hey, turn it on, don't turn it on, but create the space so that Jesus can speak to you the way he wants to speak to you, not listen to something else or listen to the pastor on the platform, get your revelation. Like, don't borrow his revelation, find a revelation for yourself. And I think in the social media world, oh, that was good, I'm gonna hold on to that one. And yes, I think it's great, but go find Jesus for yourself. Go find him and learn his nature for what he wants to speak to you and how he wants to speak to you and what he's speaking to you about the season that you're in, because you may feel like you're in that waiting season, but there's something that God wants to teach you in that. And so you need to be content knowing that that's what he's forming in you and that's what he's molding in you. And so I think that's the prayer, that we would just be a little background music to letting Jesus speak to you how he wants to speak to you.
Hey, everybody, this is Rita Springer. Thank you so much for coming in and joining me on the podcast here with Worship is My Weapon. There's a lot of things I'm doing right now, and one of the things that we provide alongside this podcast is a newsletter that we send out to those of you that are subscribed, where I just answer questions and kind of give you information, and sometimes you guys are able to write in with questions that you just are curious about. We love that. We love that interaction. I actually love to interact with those of you that want something a little bit more beyond the podcast. So if that's you, make sure to get our newsletter, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the newsletter, and stay in touch with all the things that we're doing here on the podcast in that newsletter. Do you get nervous at all about the rising notoriety and how to handle that? Or do you feel like that because maybe that's part of the bigger picture of what God would do, that he'd give you all the understanding and the process of it?
I lean more on that side.
Yeah.
I honestly, I don't think nervous is the right word.
Yeah.
I think we're just in awe.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Like we are just like, we wake up and we're like,
I'm more in it than you are because I do all those.
yeah,
I do
Garett, he does.
I see all this. She don't see nothing.
Yeah.
I just sing.
She lives in a
She just
cloud.
sings. I do. I'm up till midnight editing. She's asleep, snoring over there, and I'm just like, I'm almost done.
gosh.
I can go to sleep and
Garett,
get 3
I
hours.
hear ya. I'm like, people are like, oh, your marketing team is great. I'm like, that would be me.
Thank you.
That's
I
it,
take
Garett.
full
Garett,
credit for
that's
that.
me.
That would be me.
We
Thank
did
you.
a writing session with someone a few weeks ago, and she was like picking Garrett's brain on like, how do you do this? How do you do that? And Garrett's like, it's a literal full-time job.
Oh,
That's
it is. Yeah.
obnoxious.
And she was like taking notes. She's like, I'm telling my social media marketing
like,
company.
have a
And
blast.
I was like, well, good luck over there.
Yeah,
But,
yeah. I think you said it. We're so humbled that
Yeah.
we can
Yeah.
be a part of just the little things that people have said and the just unreal stories of
yeah.
like.
And I think too, like, we didn't start this for notoriety.
No.
Like, and I mean that as, I know a lot of people can say that and you can
Yeah,
probably read right
yeah.
through them, but like, I mean that wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
Like we just said, we want to get in a room. We want to worship.
Yeah.
We want to learn how to hear the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
It honestly came off of, I keep thinking about this from our conversation earlier, is like the disappointment thing.
Yeah.
Starting Garett and Kate kind of came out of a little bit of a disappointment that we experienced. And it's not like I felt like God said, here's your next step after disappointment.
Yeah.
But I felt like it was a little bit of a response for Garett and I
Yeah.
to say, this has never been about notoriety. It's never been about who's going to see it or who's going to post it or who's going to talk to us from it or whatever the case may be. It was truly just like, we thought we were hearing God on a certain thing in our life, and it was an abrupt no. And we sat in our driveway and wept for like an hour and a half. And then we got up and we said, we're starting Garett and Kate. We feel like it's time. Like we feel like God said to do it. And the next Wednesday, we sat in a room and picked Holy Forever was our first song. And we just said, we're in the key of G. We're going for it. I messed up the lyrics. I didn't sing the lyrics. I mean, nothing. And
Someone
I was
commented like, "Is there a reason you didn't sing that part?" We're like, "No, we just forgot."
I was like,
it.
no, I literally just
We don't
forgot
have
the lyrics
lyrics.
and we just kept going. Like we don't start and
Yeah.
stop. We don't do anything.
Yeah.
It is a heart cry for us that is
Yeah.
honoring that other people get
Yeah.
to
Yeah. Yeah.
be a part of, So I think that has been, notoriety was never,
I think
thought
it's why
process.
I started the conversation out with the slow growth, like the slow. Sometimes when God does it, he could have taken them, according to Scripture, he could have taken the Israelites through the Red Sea a lot faster, and he didn't do that. And when he's not doing that, don't try to go faster, because there's usually always a reason that he's taking you the slower route. Right. And it's usually to preserve you in the process of the journey. And I think that's what's so beautiful about you two, is whatever happens from here on out, which it's going to be amazing. I mean, I could just feel it's going to be amazing that you guys have the journey under your belt to know he was worth it the whole time. And you don't lose that. I mean, I'm so grateful for that in my life. My era was a different era. It wasn't the download era. It wasn't the fast track TikTok era, But I can't not look back on my life and be like, I'm so grateful that we were writing songs because we were excited to see people get healed the next week. Instead of writing songs to see if somebody would download them. Right. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I cannot imagine growing up in that an era where your heart wasn't beating out of your chest when you were leading and you were wondering if somebody was going to cry out and they were going to get healed because they did last week. I mean, I just remember almost being like going to church, oh gosh, yeah. And just that in your bones. It's like in your marrow that I had enough of that it was like when it came time to the crossroads of, well, you're going to sell your soul to the devil for a radio. I couldn't do it because I had so much of that in my DNA at the point. And I think that is, I'm so grateful for that. Yeah. I'm so grateful for this slow journey, the slow process. And it's still slow for me. And it's like, well, I guess maybe, but I've learned so much along the way. And I think that you guys are on that path.
Yeah. And I think like that's what you're saying is like you say, we led worship because we were seeing people get healed in front of us.
Yeah.
And we were seeing dead people come alive.
Yeah.
And we were seeing all of these things. And I think that's been a heart cry of Garett and I's. Our generation is different.
Yeah.
Worship looks different right now.
Yes.
Like getting
very
music
much
out
so.
there looks different right now.
Yep.
But I think like something that I've asked the Lord is like, God, like, would we see miracles, signs, and wonders because we believe?
Yeah.
Like, we believe it's going to happen. And I believe that when we sit down every Wednesday and we record these worship sessions, whoever's on the other side of that camera is going to find restoration and healing because I believe it in my spirit. And I like every fiber of my being believes it. And it's like when there is doubt, like the word is like when you have doubt, you're like you're unstable and you're unwavering waves. And I'm like, no, Lord, like help me with my unbelief.
Yeah.
Because I believe that sitting down in this room and with cameras, which is kind of weird. Some people at first were like, that's weird that you guys are like sitting in a room and like it's just you three and like there's cameras everywhere. Like, how is that not awkward? And I'm like, honestly, because it's just, I believe that whoever's on the other side of that camera is going to experience God like never before.
And we've heard it. Like, that's been the cool part. Like, I'm the one that sees all the comments and everything. But I see the stories of like, I'm playing this while I'm in the hospital right now, and there's a overwhelming peace. And I'm like, man, that's everything.
Yeah. Who knew? Who would have known that would,
Someone in Georgia is like, man, God's just turning my life around right now through this. Or, man, I really was questioning Jesus, and then somehow I found this. And now I'm starting to go to church again, and I'm restarting this relationship or whatever that is. Like, that's everything. I don't know. That's so cool. You wake up and you see that, and I'm like, that's
somebody
awesome.
once told me when if you ever get to the point where the testimonies become so peripheral, something's wrong with you.
Wow.
And the testimonies keep you alive because it keeps the purpose kind of in the center of your chest. Yeah. And I used to have a box, this huge box that I just stuffed all these things in. Was I telling you guys about that this weekend? Maybe your mom. And whenever the Lord would, these are back in, you put a stamp on a, but it's you couldn't even open up the box, it's in storage, but because letters would just become popping out. But the Lord would say, keep all of those letters because you need to remind your soul that I did something. Wow. And I mean, the stories would just be drug addicts, just like marriages, miscarriages, and they would just pile up and pile up and pile up. And I still live off the testimonies. Like now it's the DMs and if we ever get to the point where we're not reading the testimonies, then it's a sad day because I think that's the reason why we're doing what we're doing.
Well, I think, I'm the prophetic guy. So I remember this word that I got of like, you're going to write lullaby songs that are going to heal kids in hospitals.
Wow.
And so I told Kim, I'm doing a lullaby record because I want to write songs that heal cancer. That heal kids that are laying in bed in a hospital room. And I'm like, that's the kind of heart we have. Like we want to be able to sing over people and sing fear away and sing pain away and declare things over people. And we'll stop in our sessions and we'll pray against fear because we feel like that's what people are going to need when we release it. And Kate will come on, like she'll command people like they're in the room, like, hey, worship, like take a moment, just like honor the Lord. Like that's our heart. Yeah. And that's the stuff that gets us excited. And I'm like, and I'll be like, oh, babe, look at this amazing story of life change, And we've heard stories that bring us to tears. I'm like, wow, God, what an honor that you would allow us to be the soundtrack for people to encounter you. Like, that's the most humbling. And like, wow, Lord, thank you for like the opportunity to do that. And that means more than anything to us. And so,
it's so beautiful. You guys are the best. You guys are the best.
Wow.
Yeah,
Well,
so,
I'm so proud of.
thank you.
I'm so proud of you guys.
Thank you.
It is. It's like, you know, I mean, I don't know what Anna felt like when she saw the Messiah walk through the temple, but when you have a word from the Lord, and then all of a sudden you, years later, get to see these kids that the Lord said, I'm raising up. Like, I was 27 when he told me that. So that was a long time ago. You guys weren't even born yet. But it's so sweet to think, wow, you know, the Lord is always getting ready to do something beautiful in a generation and always getting ready to release beautiful things. And he still just loves to be sung to. Yeah. And I just want to say thank you for singing to him. Thank you for just creating a space for us to just sigh in a world gone crazy. And that's what you guys, your worship's done for me. It's just, whew, you know. So thank you for that. And thank you for being just examples to worship leaders in churches, on staff, all over, that have dreams and visions and want to cultivate worship teams and want to cultivate songwriting. You can do this. Yes. Like, you can do this. God's called you to do it. And you have the ability and the capabilities to pull it off. So thank you guys. You guys are great. You guys are awesome.